What's good, family? Welcome to Pretty Realist. If this is your first time joining my channel, welcome. So tonight we're going to be discussing something I have been extremely excited to discuss because I was hearing about this little party switch the entire campaign season in 2024. Every time I turn around, I get a black liberal talking about, well, the party switch, the KKK is now being ran by the Republicans and the Democrats. They the party that's for us. So you a sellout if you vote for the Republicans. I know I wasn't the only one that was hearing this, but that's pretty much what was told to me. You know that at the beginning, Black people definitely used to be conservatives, Republicans in record numbers. They did not mess around with the Democrats. In fact, the Republicans are actually the first party that gave Black Americans a seat at the table when it comes to Congress. They fought with us. They were also out there catching hell because they stood with us. But at some point, I guess they changed their minds. This is what I've been told. I got questions. Y'all probably got questions too. So let's go ahead and get into this video. It is on Forgotten History. Please make sure you all follow his channel. And then, of course, I'll be giving my little commentary here and there.
The theory suggests that Democrats and Republicans swapped ideological platforms during the 20th century, especially on issues like civil rights, race, and the role of government. In this version of history, the Republican Party supposedly embraced the policies and voters of the old Southern Democrats, while Democrats claimed to have transformed into champions of civil rights and minority causes. The Democrat Party, as we know it, was shaped by Andrew Jackson, a populist but also a slaveholder. The Republican Party, founded in the 1850s, was the party of Abraham Lincoln and born in opposition to the expansion of slavery, but not the abolishment of slavery. Please see our videos on Jackson and Lincoln. After the Civil War, Republicans pushed Reconstruction policies to protect the rights of freed Black people. Meanwhile, Southern Democrats created and enforced Jim Crow laws, maintaining segregation and opposing civil rights for African Americans well into the 20th century. Even Democrat President Woodrow Wilson was a staunch racist who wanted complete government control and created the Internal Revenue Service with the 16th Amendment in 1913 and the Federal Reserve to take more money from Americans. By the 1930s, under Franklin D. Roosevelt, the Democratic Party began courting working-class voters, including Northern Black communities, with programs like the New Deal. But FDR did little to nothing to improve race relations in the South and refused to support anti-lynching legislation or desegregation of the military. He confiscated gold supplies from Americans, and he had the opportunity to desegregate the military and allow the immigration of Jews under persecution from Germany and Austria, and he refused.
And you know what's crazy? Now this is some new information for me because I did read about the New Deal. It was a good opportunity for Americans, especially during the Great Depression. But they didn't really do much for Black people. They literally gave us sprinkles. In fact, they didn't want Black people to make a lot of money. And that's actually where the $2.13 tipping policy came from. This video, I have this video that I saw on TikTok, and this lady literally made it seem as if Franklin Roosevelt did so much for Black people. And it's crazy to me because it's like, okay, if y'all gonna be telling the story, y'all need to be telling everything. Don't be leaving out key components of the story. Like how Franklin D. Roosevelt ignored the fact that Black people were literally being experimented on when it comes to the Tuskegee experiment, allowed it to continue to go on. Also, I believe that there were several Black communities that were destroyed while Democrats were in office. How is it that Black Americans are not aware of Andrew Johnson? Because like he always seems to fall through the cracks. To keep, as people who are going to tell history about anything regarding the Democrat Party, we need to keep our foot on Andrew Johnson's neck. Get back to the video. Just had to say that real fast.
See our videos on FDR. The Democrats also supported labor unions, which the Republicans in general saw as a communist attempt to control effective business practices. The Northern Democrats tended to be supportive of civil rights for blacks to gain their support away from the Republican Party, which was business-friendly and pushing for limited government involvement, but this divided the Democrats. Southern Democrats remained fiercely segregationist, while Northern Democrats grew more supportive of civil rights, causing growing tension within the party. The 1950s and 60s pressure mounted. Northern Democrats supported civil rights legislation to secure black votes, while Southern Democrats resisted fiercely, trying to block blacks from voting. Senators like Strom Thurmond and Robert Byrd, the latter a former KKK member, and see our video on him, were both Democrats who led the charge against civil rights from within the Democratic Party. The other major opponent to civil and voting rights for blacks in the South was Texas Senator Lyndon Baines Johnson, the future president, who, along with Democratic Senator Robert C. Byrd of West Virginia, fought tooth and nail to keep blacks from receiving legal recourse under the Constitution. Senator Byrd himself had, in the early 1940s, recruited about 150 of his friends and relatives and other associates to create a new chapter of the Ku Klux Klan in Sophia, West Virginia. He later changed his political position on civil rights.
If you enjoyed this video, I would greatly appreciate if you would click that bell, subscribe to the channel so that way you'll get updated whenever I drop new videos.
Rights as well, but remained a Democrat. Despite his long history of being previously opposed to the various civil rights bills, LBJ signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965,
which would not have passed had it not been for the Republicans.
Largely due to political pressure and the rise of figures like Republican Barry Goldwater, who opposed federal overreach and supported racial equality. This alienated many white Southern Democrats, also known as Dixiecrats, who had historically opposed integration and supported segregation. This was when the Republican Party began to appeal to Southern Democrats who wanted limited government in their lives, greater states' rights, and the social conservative platform of Republicans began to appeal to many Southerners who were drifting away from the racial mindset. Goldwater's posture and perceived hardline stance against communism was in alignment with conservatives, but it was also used against him, a position which LBJ initially claimed publicly to be opposed to, despite his later creating the Gulf of Tonkin incident as a ruse to get legislation passed to send American combat troops to South Vietnam. Due to the creation of welfare and other entitlements by the Johnson administration in order to buy the black vote through generational patronage, Democrats had a durable base among minorities, urban voters, and socially liberal intellectuals. Also, Southern Democrats were anti-legal immigration into their states, while the Northern Democrats promoted legal immigration. Also, Southern Protestants were typically more religious and church-going, while the Northern, East, and West Coast Democrats began to walk away from organized religion and adopted pro-Marxist platforms, which were deemed by Southern conservatives as anti-American. This all triggered a backlash, and Johnson famously said, "We have lost the South for a generation, but we have the black vote for the next 200 years.
Now, if you're going to say it right now. He said, I had them niggers voting for the next 200 years. That's what he said.
This was the moment when many Southern white voters, alienated by civil rights policies and federal welfare expansion, began to shift toward the Republican Party, not because the GOP embraced racism, but because it promoted limited government, states' rights, and traditional family values. Another factor aiding in the shift was the Vietnam War, which also divided the country along political lines, and LBJ took the greatest criticism from his own party as a result. Democrats were heavily divided on Vietnam as well. The majority of politically liberal Democrats opposed their own Democrat President Johnson regarding U.S. involvement, while more conservative Democrats and Republicans either took a neutral or pro-American involvement in fighting communism. In 1968, Richard M. Nixon ran on the presidential GOP ticket, and he courted disaffected Southern whites using code words like law and order, states' rights, and opposition to forced busing, while still maintaining the GOP support for black rights, which still divided Democrats. This opened the door for Republicans, notably Richard Nixon and later Ronald Reagan, who used what has become known as the Southern Strategy to gain support in the South by appealing to concerns about federal overreach against states' rights and cultural change. Richard Nixon's Southern Strategy emphasized law and order and opposition to federal busing policies, which was a big deal to Democrats, appeals that resonated with voters frustrated by cultural and political upheaval. Nixon had campaigned on getting out of Vietnam, which satisfied many of both parties' voters and also added Southern whites to Republican rolls. Nixon also ended the Democrat-created Tuskegee syphilis experiment program created by Democrats, among other legislation. And
Wait a minute. Hold on. So they started the Tuskegee experiment in 1932. 1932. They did not stop the Tuskegee experiment until 1972. 40 damn years.
And see our video on Nixon. Ronald Reagan later unified these groups into a larger conservative coalition, business leaders, evangelicals, and working class whites under the banner of small government and anti-socialist policies. Democrats became the party of urban centers, progressives, minorities, and coastal elites. They eventually abandoned the Ku Klux Klan, which they had created after the Civil War and supported for a century because the hate group had become too toxic.
They didn't abandon their asses. They just traded the sheets for suits and ties and judge robes and police uniforms and firefighter uniforms and teacher attire. They hidden in plain sight. Let's be honest now.
Republicans attracted religious conservatives, rural voters, small business owners, and working class traditionalists, especially in the South and Midwest, as progressive Democrats, especially in the North, turned away from supporting religion, which conservatives found appalling. Yes, it is true that some Democrat figures switched parties, like Strom Thurmond of South Carolina, but the idea that the GOP adopted the racist legacy of the Democratic South is misleading and patently false. The Ku Klux Klan, for instance, was never embraced by the GOP. In fact, the Reagan administration helped dismantle it legally and financially, effectively destroying it. Over the years, Democrats embraced more progressive positions on gun control, gender identity, immigration, and race. They allied with activist groups like Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and others whose critics argued furthered social and political division and supported wanton violence.
Look at that.
Meanwhile, many centrist and conservative Democrats, especially in the South, left the party altogether, becoming Republicans or independents. This wasn't a swap, it was an evolution. In essence, the Democrats who have revised their history to remove the stains of slavery, Jim Crow, and violence against blacks have lost control. Democrats love to identify Republicans as being the party of racist and anti-middle class workers. They claim that Republicans adopted all the evils of the old Democrats while never acknowledging the fact that the Democrats were the progenitors of the evil they now claim to oppose. So let's set the record straight. The Republican Party did not become the party of racism. The Democratic Party didn't suddenly erase its legacy of slavery, segregation, opposition to civil rights, lynching, and violence. The great lie that was created and still pushed by Democrats is that the Great Switch included the Republicans adopting a racist and domestic terror policy and embracing groups such as the Ku Klux Klan, which never happened. In fact, it was under Reagan that the Klan was finally destroyed. However, ultra-right nationalist groups that arose have traditionally been Republican in their voting habits since the late 1970s, while ultra-left domestic terror groups remained entrenched within the Democrat Party, replacing the far-right Democrats created and supported KKK. In fact, the modern Democrats today still support active violence. But did the parties really switch? Well, not exactly. There was no official swap of platforms or party names. Instead, there was a gradual realignment of coalitions. The Republican base grew in the South and included all these previous groups because they were socially conservative working class Americans, and recently many Democrats who abandoned their party and registered as Republicans or independents actually voted for Donald Trump. The Reagan Revolution in the 1980s brought together business interests and everyone else who felt disenfranchised by Democrat politics, and they united under the GOP brand using an anti-liberal, anti-socialist states' rights message and limited government platform. The shift was a gradual realignment of voters' ideologies and regional priorities, not a clean switch. The Democrat platform wanted to abolish the Second Amendment. That was a large part of the political shift in politics. Over time, Democrats became more aligned with the urban minority and progressive voter in major cities on the East and West Coast and in large northern and even some southern cities, while the Republicans have attracted and contained and retained rural, religious, and conservative voters, particularly in the South and Midwest. More recent Democrat-supported criminal entities such as Black Lives Matter and Antifa, and see our video on BLM, and even their left-wing socialist predecessors like the Weather Underground terrorists, and also see our video on them, remained loyal to and were supported by the Democrats and still are to this day. These actions drove conservative Democrats even further away from the party and further divided Democrats and forced others to change affiliation. The argument had been that the parties literally swapped the names and positions, but the parties evolved gradually and their ideological coalition shifted and Democrat methods remained pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Today's political map reflects decades of migration, economic change, and cultural realignment, not a simple party flip. African American voters, who largely supported the GOP after the Civil War, began overwhelmingly voting Democrat after the 1960s due to the laws passed by LBJ, and the black support regarding both parties still favor the Democrats, but in far less numbers today. It's not about who changed names. It's about who showed up and what they stood for. People generally vote with their pocketbooks, and Democrat policies have always increased taxes, reduced employment opportunities, increased interest and mortgage rates, increased nonsensical spending at home and abroad, as well as increased the general cost of living. But perhaps the greatest driving force sending former Democrats to the middle or right were the Biden administration's policies on taxpayers funding millions of illegal immigrants, importing and increasing violent crime, and the liberal Democrat supporting and George Soros funded mainstream media being caught in thousands of lies, supporting Democratic criminal activities, and creating conspiracies against conservatives. And see our video on George Soros. So, to set the record straight, the two parties didn't switch names or trade platforms. What changed were their coalitions, the kinds of voters they attracted, and the cultural issues they championed. So yes, there was a switch of sorts, but it was simply a matter of those citizens with a socially and fiscally conservative mindset drifting more to the political right to whom they were aligned, and today's socialist, liberal, tax and spend collective remaining on the left. It is as simple as that.
Guess it wasn't that big of a switch. I just think that more people possibly just left the party because of, change of ideas. The party has evolved tremendously. Both parties have evolved tremendously. Do we have racist people on both sides? Absolutely. Absolutely. But I definitely do not see that big of a change for the Democrats compared to what history has showed us. The only difference is that they are kind of the authors of covert racism. So they don't say that they're racist right in your face. They just do certain things that show their racism. I would say that white conservatives who are racist, you gonna know that they asses don't like you. You gonna know it. I respect that. I would rather know my enemy than my enemy act as if they're my friend and they do something completely out of line behind my back. The Democrats have literally been responsible for disrupting the flow of wealth to our country, the flow of wealth to our community because of the Freedmen's Bank. Make sure you all check out my video regarding the Freedmen's Bank. They created black codes, even though we had the right to vote, we had the right to buy land, we had the right to protect ourselves with firearms. Black codes made it increasingly difficult for us to do so. Also gave away a lot of the land that Black Americans had. They allowed illegal immigrants to flood our neighborhoods now, today. Today they allow it. If you look in every liberal city with Black Americans, 9 times out of 10, you're going to see that Black Americans have the highest rate of unemployment in that city. They're going to be the one that's the most disenfranchised, meaning they'll probably be in the hood somewhere. They'll probably have the most violent crimes that's taking place in their city. And 9 times out of 10, it probably was at one point a Black neighborhood, and it has been incredibly gentrified. They have the worst schools, and nobody seems to notice because they still continue to vote for Democrat, because a lot of people have that mindset of, well, the Democrats are going to make sure that I get my welfare, that I get my benefits, that I get my food stamps, that I get my Section 8. They're going to make sure that I could continue to be trans if I want to be a man one day. They're going to make sure that I'm protected. They're going to make sure that I'm protected if I'm illegal in this country. If I want to have a baby, even though I don't have my paperwork, they're going to make sure that my child becomes an American citizen, and that I'm going to still get some taxpayers to take care of me and my child, even though I'm illegal. They're going to make sure that all of that is taken care of, and make your enemy look as if they are doing what you are actually doing. That's what they do. And as you can see in this video, clearly states that that's what they have been practicing, is Marxism. But at the end of the day, the long-standing effects of what the Democrat Party has done, not only to this country when it comes to Woodrow Wilson, but to Black America, needs to continuously be a reminder when you all step into that voting booth. They have not changed. If you put lipstick on a pig, guess what? It's still a pig. So one day I'm hoping that Black Americans will eventually walk away from this party, because if you all do not see right now that they are replacing you, that you are no longer the group of people that are looked at as a priority to them, I'm not sure what else to tell you. The 8% of us that decided that we would no longer be on that Democrat plantation, I take my hat off to you guys. Because we went through hell and hot water from our own community when we made that switch. We switched because we saw that the Democrat Party was going down a dark path. We voted out of ignorance of identity politics. And that's just what our families were doing. That's what our mothers, our fathers, our grandmothers, grandfathers were doing. But once we woke up and we realized that we have the choice to save this country, that we have an opportunity to change this country, to make it better, that's why we did what we did. And ever since we've done what we've done, the revelation of who the Democrat Party actually is has been loud and clear.
Good afternoon, everyone. Fuck off, MAGA.
A leopard never changes their spots, and we see it right now. So I hope y'all paying attention. Because I am.
It's about time. Yeah, churches and Catholic schools and religious schools, it's about time they get their turn. That's what I think. I'm just going to sit back and watch people do it. And I'm going to fucking laugh.
I'm rooting for y'all to walk away from this party. I really am. Because they're taking everybody to hell with them. You already heard him say they walked away from religion. They've been doing everything to destroy Christianity in this country. Now, I'm not a religious person. I know who God is, and I worship only one. You will never, ever get me to go to hell with you just because I'm voting with you. And that's the truth. I'm going to get up out of here, guys. Listen, don't shoot the messenger. Only receive the message. If it's for you, receive it. If it's not, leave it. Do you feel as if the Democrats are still the same people? Do you feel as if the Republicans are leaning more towards the old ways of the Democrats? I would love to hear from you. Let's go ahead and keep it going down below in the comments, and I will see you all on the next video.
Just trying to stay sucker free in a world full of lollipops. I'm seeing all the ops. Fake news, fake views. It's an illness, the cure to the sick shit. It's the pretty realist.